So far, Incarnon weapons have been absolutely insane. They pack a punch, they're exciting, they're fun, they're new, but they also set the bar quite high. For this week in Rotation 4, the Atomos is the most anticipated weapon to get the Incarnon Adaptor. And the question is, will it stack up to its predecessors? As always, my name is Leyzar and I got an endgame setup, simply because these Incarnon adapters are meant for more experienced players, as new players can't exactly get their hands on them. That said, we're still gonna be going through everything you need to know. What works, what doesn't, what evolutions to pick, and how the build would actually look like. So with that out of the way, let's jump into the Incarnon Atomos. Let's begin by checking out how the weapon handles without any mods equipped. And for that, just a couple of our regular free shots. The Incarnon Atomos will function pretty much like the regular Atomos. This is a beam weapon with a limited range of 15 meters by default. Upon hitting your initial target, your beam is going to be chaining to 3 additional targets. Adding punch through will not mean you're going to be getting additional jumps. In order to get this one into Incarnon form, after you have installed your Incarnon Genesis Adaptor, you're gonna get this fancy new crosshairs that changes configuration as soon as you go into aim mode. Yet headshots and the loading bar underneath it will continuously load. Now the load is pretty slow, but with any load level you can change to Incarnon form and the weapon is gonna be changing its appearance aesthetically. It basically gains a little bit of detail here and there. Now the weapon is a projectile based attack. You can't see the projectile. It's invisible for the time being, and I'm assuming this is a early bug for the weapon, but upon contact this one is gonna be detonating at an absolutely massive 7.9 meter explosion. But unfortunately the damage drop off is also massive at roughly 80%. The projectile upon contact with a target deals impact damage, but the actual explosion itself is gonna be dealing blast damage. And the total charge, maximum charge, is gonna be 21 explosions. This is a semi-automatic trigger. Evolution level 1 simply enables the transformation. At level 2 is where you get your first choice between the following: Paladin Virtue and Hoplite Virtue. Paladin Virtue will increase your base damage by 24, and with energy max over 700, for example, like my Revenant, increases critical damage by plus 1x. Essentially, it should modify the critical multiplier and go to 4x. The second option is Hoplite Virtue, increases damage by 24, the same 24 base damage, and on shield break, this one grants you an additional 30 damage for 8 seconds. And on shield break means on your shield break, the Warframe's shield break, not your enemy's shield break. Unfortunately, at the current time, Evolution 2 tier is completely broken. None of these talents function, not actively or passively. You are not getting any benefit whatsoever from these. But let's talk as if you were. Ideally, it's easier to go with Paladin Virtue because you're going to be getting plenty of Warframes that have energy max over 700. This does not mean you should have 700 energy active on your Warframe, just the maximum energy to be 700. And besides, you're still getting that 24 base damage, and the increased critical multiplier will be making for a more powerful talent. This is what I'm gonna be recommending as soon as it's fixed. Up until that point, you can pick whatever you want, it simply doesn't function. Next up, Evolution 3, we got Resonate Restore. On reload from empty, increases magazine capacity by plus 5, stacks up 7, that means 35. As you might have guessed, this one only functions in the normal form of the Atomos, taking the magazine from 70 all the way to 105. On this buff, there is no timer whatsoever. Essentially, once you stacked it in a mission, you're gonna keep it always. However, I did notice one time on reload from empty, from 5 it went to 1. I have no idea why. I tested if it actually was because of the Incarnon form or not. It never did it again, so there you go. This one might be a little bit on the buggy side as well. Mercenary Chamber increases ammo capacity to 560 from the base 350. It's not a bad talent. Normally you shouldn't really have any ammo issues, considering we want to keep these weapons normally in their Incarnon form. And the final one is going to be increased range by 7 meters, again applies to the normal form only. This does not increase the area of the explosion, this one remaining at 7.9 meters. In the Excel slot of the Atomos, you can also play around with Ruinous Extension, so you don't really need this one. But if you want the biggest beam, you can go with both, I guess. For the time being, as per the usual, Evolution 3 is a little bit of dealer's choice, and I found that Resonant Restore is actually quite fun to play with. That big 105 magazine capacity with a bit of fire rate in the normal form is quite satisfying. If not, simply go with Moonrise Velocity. And the final tier, the most powerful tier, you have an option of free. First of all, Elemental Balance increases status chance by 20%. Now that 20% of course is going to be applying to the normal form and to the explosion as well. The normal status chance is 41, this one takes it to 61%. I would advise you go for the following talent. Commodore's Fortune increases critical chance by 19%. The last one is the balanced option, Survivor's Edge, critical chance and status chance 10%. The reason why we're going for critical chance is because we don't really have that much of a need for that status chance when it comes to the explosion. You might see the impact here and say, hey, hold on, more impact, we can go for a hemorrhage. Not really, that's just the projectile making contact with a target. The actual explosion only has elemental damage and it's blast by default plus whatever else you choose to make on the weapon. Best in slot is gonna be the 19% base critical chance from Commodore's Fortune. As for the actual build, I want you to bear in mind that the Incarnon adapters are not exactly new player oriented, simply because new players will have a hard time at actually getting these adapters. But if you're newer to Warframe, rest assured that the Atomos, without the Incarnon adapter, is a fantastic new player option. And if you want to learn more about the Atomos and how to mod it in a more new player friendly approach, link in the cards right now for a full and detailed guide. As for veterans that have the endo, the mods, the resources and everything else, we're going to be looking at something like this. Yes, we're gonna mod for critical chance and critical damage. The size of our explosion is gonna go to 11.38 thanks to Prime Fulmination. Again, the base is 7.9. We gotta increase that, especially considering that the follow-up is terrible at 80%. Once again, this means that we're only getting 100% of that 5.6k damage modded right now at the epicenter of the explosion, and you're losing a lot of damage really quickly as you fan outward. In order to leverage as many multipliers as we can, we're also going to be using a faction mod. Galvanized Diffusion is a no-brainer. 260-60 corrosive mods, since we're not going to be going for applying slashes on this one because there is no viable way to apply slash on this one. Again, this impact only really applies to the projectile making contact with a target, and you don't really have a hunter munitions version for secondary weapon, so therefore we gotta go for a bit more raw strength. To that approach, you can swap out the 60-60 mods for the 90 mods for a bigger wallop worth of damage. If not, you can even work in prime heated charge, because look, it's a white mod with more damage, it means it's better. Not necessarily. The mod we're going to be using right here is a Riven, is a critical chance damage and minus weapon recoil. Yes, that is a triple positive. Sadly, I wish it was plus recoil because the weapon essentially has no recoil. Flat damage is going to be coming from this and from your arcane slot as well. Best in slot is going to be Cascadia Flare, this one. The problem with Cascadia Flare, you can easily stack it with the normal form, but then you got to change to the Incarnon form and the duration is only 10 seconds. Sometimes it drops off and your explosions are not that fantastic, but it should be said that this one is best in slot as long as you can keep it up consistently. Take a look at your buff bar. If you see it disappear too often, for your explosion to be effective, you can simply go for secondary Merciless. It's the more simpler and solid approach. For the time being, we're gonna be going with Cascadia Flare. Galvanized Shot, why aren't you using it? Because it's not gonna apply its damage benefit to the explosion, because it's not supposed to. That's simply how it works in Warframe. If you wish to forma a bit differently than me, although I had enough forma on my Atomos for now, you can use lethal momentum with projectile flight speed in your Excel slot. That's gonna help the travel speed of the projectile, which I cannot see or measure in Captura because it's not visible. I'm pretty sure it's a bug, but it might not be. If you don't enjoy the recoil, you go for steady hands. Now, let's test out the weapon and see how she performs. I'm gonna make sure, as per the usual, that I have no corrosive projection on my Revenant, so it doesn't skew the test results, and the targets will not hit me, so that Avenger will not be triggering. Level 165, Corrupted Heavy Goons, no Exogoog because we are using a faction mod. Yes, so we're gonna go for headshots. I want you to see what the weapon can do without its Incarnon form. Now this is just the Atomos, granted buffed up by that final 19% critical chance that we got from Evolution 4. Take a look at this. You can pretty much melt targets, but let's try what you came to see, the big ol' explosion. What do you guys say? Not bad at all, my friends, especially considering that the first incarnation or the first talent, granted tier 2 not tier 1, doesn't give us anything right now. There is no damage with or without it, so it's even gonna be better than this. Big bada boom explosion. But you know what's the problem with big bada boom explosion? Big bada boom explosion falls off if it's just raw damage like it is right now. Also, that wasn't the full power of the weapon because you gotta stack Cascadia Flare. You see how that one can get a little bit annoying, which is why I recommend Unless you have something else to proc it off, you should drop it and try something like either Deadhead if you're comfortable with Deadhead, though for the explosions you are going to be aiming for the feet and trying to get that epicenter damage, so secondary Merciless is going to be the more comfortable way. Not necessarily what is the best DPS on paper, simply what is the best comfortable and more sustained DPS. So let's do that one more time. Getting back to the explosion at hand, the problem is it's a whole lot of flat damage, and flat damage is fantastic until it's not. There will come a point in enemy levels where it simply drops off, and it's not gonna be that fantastic anymore. But until then, my friends, these explosions are absolutely huge at 11 meters something, but I do feel like they overdid it with the drop-off. 80%? 80% feels a bit aggressive. But you know what? Why don't we have a look at how this one performs in Steel Path? Welcome to the Void. Now let's see what the Incarnon Atomos can do against Steel Path Corrupted level 130. And yes, I have still retained my faction mod, so this should be pretty easy peasy. Full charge, go in Incarnon form. Now let's see those big beautiful explosions. As you can see, you're not really gonna have much issue at this level. You might have some issue at higher levels, but for the time being, my friends, big explosions are most definitely fun. And again, we are not really witnessing the full power of the weapon, considering the first incarnation is bugged. You see, the critical multiplier of the explosion is 3.3x. That is huge, but if the first talent would work with Revenant and this build, which has over 700 energy, that would mean I would get a 4x multiplier, which is absolutely bloody huge, especially considering the mods we have available for secondary weapons. We got prime critical damage, which is absolutely huge. Not only that, of course, in the last evolution, I'm also going to be taking the 19% crit, so it's going to be even better than this. But for the time being, it is what it is. And I don't know about you guys, but big explosions to me in Warframe are still heavily fun, and these are not gimped by ammunition reserves. So it is still fun to play, at least for the time being. Now, of course, you can go even higher than this with damage, but first let's see what this one could theoretically do to a Acolyte. I think I just got the flash from the Acolyte, and the Acolyte is violence. Are you the guy with the bubble? I fear the guy with the bubble. I got myself good enough charge, and I do believe he's down here somewhere. I guess if I kill everything, he's gotta show up, right?
Violence is violence. Where you run? How am I supposed to fight him if he runs?
Now, one good explosion deserves another, so to that end we can make it rain with Lady Mirage Prime and her outstanding buffs. Of course, corrosive projection to lower the armor of the heavily armored targets is going to be fantastic for more damage. If you have a way to completely remove the armor, then you're basically going to be one-shotting all the time, no problem whatsoever. Arcane Pistolier does not work in Incarnon form. Using this one, whatever you feel is a bit more appropriate for your Warframe, something like your Energized armor and so on and so forth. Now, if I remember correctly, we do have a secondary fire rate arcane, and it's by the name of Velocity, if I remember correctly. There we go. On critical hit, 90% chance, 120% fire rate to pistol, so we can use this one together with Arcane Avenger. Now, at the current build, for the explosions, we already got like 140-something% critical chance. When it comes to companion buffs, you can use the Panzerwolf for some yummy viral proc, which will do its job just fine. We're gonna be spawning the same targets as before. They're gonna hit me so I can get my glorious buffs, and you can see what Mirage can do with this outstanding weapon. But first, let's charge it. Empower for Mirage, her free ability for a massive damage increase, and her ever so lovely clones. Now let's see some headshots. I mean, here's the thing about the Atomos. It melts as it is. That last talent, the evolution 3, the extra critical chance, helps the normal fire mode tons as well. The problem with the normal fire mode is the fact that it's got a base critical multiplier of 1.7, which isn't really all that fantastic now, is it? But on the other hand, the explosion has a critical multiplier of 3x. And if the talent would have worked at level 1, you would have gotten 4x by default, which is absolutely huge. But I know that's not what you want to hear or see. You want to see the big explosion, so by all means, let's see the big explosions. Of course, we're going to be able to one-shot. This is as much credit to the weapon as it is to Mirage. By all intents and purposes, she amplifies the weapon damage by a truck ton. But as you can see, essentially it's vaporized. Now you see them, now you don't. Now let's draw some conclusions regarding the Incarnon Atomos. Let's not beat around the bush, it's bugged, okay? You're not seeing the weapon's full power because you are missing that level 1 talent, and that, well fine, tier 2 talent, And that one brings something significant. Not only the base damage, which matters a whole lot because essentially the mods that you put on the weapon are going to be bouncing off of that, but more importantly, that critical multiplier that goes to 4x. These are significant buffs that you're currently not seeing. Still, the weapon performs well as it is. You're getting a big explosion. The problem with the explosion is the fact that it's just that big raw damage. And big raw damage definitely has its limitation, but it doesn't mean it's not fun. Perhaps the Lex has set the bar a little bit too high. Now, does that mean that this weapon is not absolutely glorious and fantastic? I mean, how could you not like this? How could you not like something like this? It's absolutely freaking glorious. But considering the state of the weapon, I'm gonna recommend you skip it for this rotation. Yes, I'm aware you guys wanted this one to be the best. I know that most of you were excited for the Atomos the most. But let's wait until the next rotation. Perhaps they're gonna fix it till then. As always, my name is Leyzar. Thank you guys so much for watching. Like, favorite, share, and subscribe only if you enjoy the content. If you got any feedback from me, I would love to read it in the comment section down below. Also in the comment section down below, if you want to suggest any particular type of content. You can also catch me on Twitch, Facebook, Twitter, all the usual places. And if you love the content and you want to help me keep making it, consider supporting us via Patreon. There's gonna be a link in the upper right portion of the screen right about now. But until next time, my friends, bye-bye.